Thanks, everyone. Hello. Thank you for sticking around at the end of the day and to come to talk about France. So hopefully you guys have heard about Station F, but for those of you who may not know Station F, we are the huge startup campus in Paris. We opened 6 years ago. This is a photo from our inauguration. It was packed, and it was right at the beginning of President Macron's term. We have 1,000 early stage companies that are on site permanently. We obviously have a rotation, so after a few years we kick some of them out and we get a couple new ones in, which means that up until now we've worked with nearly 6,000 companies. So, but I'm not going to talk to you about Station F and what we do. I'm going to talk to you about the French ecosystem and some of the evolutions that we're seeing. And now, why would I come to Berlin and talk about the French ecosystem? Two reasons. One is that there's a lot of bullshit about the French ecosystem and we want to set the record straight. But two is actually because we think that the European ecosystem doesn't really exist yet. We're all just kind of a collection of different ecosystems. We don't know enough about each other in a lot of cases. And so we wanted to share some things about the French ecosystem with you, and also I brought my entire 40-person team to Berlin to learn about Berlin. Yes, actually many of them are here in this room and in other, yes, raise your hands so they can see you. I see all of you. The room is actually just my team. So anyway, we're gonna get started. The first big change that we are actually seeing in the French ecosystem is momentum and resilience. And I would have never stood on this stage and said this 2 years ago. Pre-COVID, it was just not possible to call the French ecosystem resilient, and it was not possible to draw any conclusions about any type of momentum. But what we are actually seeing is that even in this current economic climate, France is actually holding up not bad. Last year, I don't know if many of you know this, but according to Sifted, it was the only major European ecosystem that saw an increase in venture funding. That's in comparison to Germany, that's in comparison to the UK as well. Now this year, obviously, things are looking a little bit different. And despite the downturn, France and the government, this is really interesting, the government is actually, for once, taking this occasion to strengthen the ecosystem. This is something that we actually also saw in COVID, and I think many European ecosystems actually did this. Their government stepped up and offered some great support for their startups. France was one of the first ones to do so. And actually, we're seeing this as well right now. This means that actually, so far this year, in terms of funding, the Parisian ecosystem, which is light blue, just behind the UK, is actually taking a bigger piece of the pie. So we are actually not doing too bad in 2023, despite this current climate. Some of the rounds are also, there was an article that went out this morning in Sifted saying that in early stage, France is even ahead of the UK in terms of volume, which this is just something we've never seen before. But this does include some one-off rounds, particularly in overhyped AI, which I'm not calling this team, but in general. So this is a huge round that was announced in June by some really incredible former Meta and DeepMind engineers that are launching a new company in France. Now at Station F, we raised roughly 1 billion of the 14 billion that the French ecosystem raised last year, so we're kind of contributing a sizable amount now. This year, our companies for first semester have raised around 400 million, which is a drop in 22%, but the overall ecosystem in France has dropped 50%. So early stage is actually doing not too bad from where we're standing. And majority of our rounds, as you can see, are quite small. And fintech, surprisingly, has done really well. Now, this is not actually a shock to most people in France, where a majority of our unicorns are actually fintech companies as well. And we are also starting to see a lot of excitement around these three sectors, which I think pretty much every ecosystem is seeing right now. But this is the second shift, is that we're actually now not just seeing excitement, we're actually seeing real resources and real innovations in these areas. So, for example, in quantum, the French government announced a huge plan to make France a leading tech nation, as all of the different countries in Europe did, with nearly 2 billion that will go to quantum alone. We also have a number of leading quantum companies, including some that have actually raised sizable checks. So this has helped to generate a lot of excitement in the space. When it comes to climate, I think most of Europe is pretty aligned that we don't really trust the US or China to fill this for us. So I really think that there's a lot to be done here. And I wanted to actually share with you 3 companies from Station F that we're particularly excited about. The first one is Voodoo. They recently raised with lower carbon capital, which hopefully many of you have heard about. And I don't know if you can see it from this image, but it's actually dead wood that they repurpose. So it's actually pretty much transparent in this image. They also make leather out of dead wood, and they're working with tons of incredible construction companies and even luxury goods manufacturing. The second company is Neoplants. This came out of one of our incredible programs on campus. They're backed by True Ventures and a number of other funds in the US. They have been doing R&D for about 4 years now, and they will be releasing their first product this year. It's already online for pre-order. And so they develop a plant that is the equivalent of 30 house plants in terms of what it can do for air purification. Pretty impressive. And then this last one on the slide is Sweep. This is founded by a serial entrepreneur. She sold her last company to Zendesk, and she's building a platform that allows companies to track their carbon metrics and ESG metrics. They're working with a number of massive corporate clients and backed by Code2. So we have a couple of really great companies on campus that we're very excited about. And finally, AI. This probably didn't escape many of you. We had Sam Altman when he was doing his world tour that came to Station F, and the excitement that we saw this event generate actually very clearly signaled to us that the French market is very optimistic on AI and very curious about AI, which is not the case with all technologies. Also, at Station F, maybe many of you have heard of Hugging Face. This is actually a company to come out of Station F. They came to Station F when they were a B2C company, and they did a great pivot, and actually did 3 of our programs on campus. And they've since moved their headquarters, unfortunately, to the US, but they still maintain their entire tech team in Paris. And finally, Sequoia, who released Atlas earlier this month, which is a database full of great information on talent across Europe. I have to say they did just a really phenomenal job. Actually points to the number of engineers in Paris as number 2 in terms of European location. So I think it's very, very promising for these different sectors that we're seeing. The third shift that we're seeing, and I think we're seeing this across many European ecosystems, is next generation entrepreneurs and innovators. And I think a lot of you probably saw this report that was released by Axel and Deal Room, kind of highlighting I think they call them founder factories, but it's essentially the European equivalents of PayPal Mafia. And so now we have a ton of them across Europe. The leading ones in Paris are BlaBlaCar and Doctolib, but pretty much all of the unicorns have had former employees go on to launch great companies that get backed very quickly by different investors. We're also seeing a new generation of investor. This is very, very exciting. All of these funds didn't exist about 2 to 3 years ago. So and I couldn't put all of the logos that we have now on the slide. We feel like there's pretty much new funds popping up every other week. This is likely to slow down. As many of you know, powder has kind of dried up for new fund managers for the moment, but we are seeing a ton of really interesting next generation funds that are looking at also funding companies differently than maybe traditional VCs. And finally, this is the last one for the next gen piece. The French government is going after strengthening the funding ecosystem, has done a recent announcement on funding that will go specifically to deep tech, and that's about 7 billion that they have reconfirmed for deep tech primarily. But in terms of business angels, they're looking at also applying what the UK did with a tax scheme for people doing business angel investments that they are believing will unlock another 3 billion. Shift number 4. Celebrities. Why on earth should we care about celebrities in tech? I think this points to a really incredible cultural shift that we're seeing in the ecosystem. This is something that quite a few years ago we all looked across the US and we looked at all the basketball players investing, and we looked at also like people in movies and stuff like that, and we were like, how come none of them look at Europe? Well, now our European celebrities are looking at Europe, and that's pretty cool. And I actually think this is, in France at least, due partially to what we call the Sorare effect. I don't know if many of you know this company in fantasy gaming, but it also has NFT collectibles, and it had over 700 million raised. I think it was the fastest French company to hit unicorn status. And they have Mbappe, they have Serena Williams, a lot of really high-profile athletes as investors. Okay, it's in the sports arena, but a lot of other high-profile athletes are also investing in non-sports related businesses. So we have, for example, a football star from Chelsea who came to Station F and spoke at one of our diversity conferences, and he invested in an ed tech company. We also had Tony Parker come to campus and meet with a whole bunch of companies. There's a number of athletes that are now involved in investing. And a couple of them go beyond just the occasional business angel check. So we have, for example, Origins, where actually a French football star, he's in the middle, Blaise Matuidi, he actually became a GP of that fund, and goes a little bit more extreme than that. Over here, we actually have an image with a French football star who became co-founder of an actual company in the real estate space. Shift number 5, international talent. Everyone looks at the French ecosystem and they go, yes, but it's French. Actually, no. So first of all, a few years ago, we launched an incredible visa for entrepreneurs, also on employees in startup companies and investors. As you can see on the slide, it's valid 4 years, applies to the entire family, and doesn't require a specific diploma. So it's actually an incredibly advantageous visa, and it's probably one of the best ones we have in Europe. As a result, 1/3 of the people that we have at Station F are non-French. And the leading country on campus after France has been from day one, the US. And many people get shocked when they hear that. But it's true, Americans like to come to France and they like to come to Europe, and I think more of them are probably going to do so. We also have 600 people at Station F that do not speak French, and it's not a problem because we just do everything in English. Before I go on to this next trend, and this is the last one that we're seeing. I also want to say that a recent shift that we're seeing in terms of talent is before, a lot of the foreign talent that would come to France, it would be because of a specific relationship with France. They had studied there, their boyfriend was French, their mother, something, I don't know. They would come back for a specific link that they had to France. And since the beginning of this year, we are seeing people who have no ties to France. They're just tired of working where they're working, the way they're working. Many of them in Elon Musk companies, and they want to come and they want to work in Europe, and they're looking at seeing if that's possible. So I think that's a really exciting shift to see as well. And finally, ecosystem with a conscience. This is something that I don't think is a shift. I actually think it's been around from day one. I think this is all of Europe, but I hope I'm right. I think what I'm really trying to get here is that we actually really have true values that we really care about here. And I think some of it's reflected in how we build companies and the technologies we choose to support. And I also think it goes as far as the entrepreneurs that we choose to support. So 41% of the companies that we have at Station F are female co-founded or founded. This is something that we have worked really hard on, but our entire community, our entire partner base has helped us hit this metric. So it's possible. And finally, the Fighters program that we have built from day one at Station F is for underprivileged entrepreneurs. This was a request of our founder, Xavier Niel. And actually, we are growing this program to be able to support 1,000 fighters per year. So just to remind you, Station F has 1,000 companies on campus, and tomorrow we're going to be supporting also 1,000 fighters per year. In short, and this is my last slide, I'm sorry about this, it was very long. We hope that tomorrow when people think of France, they won't think of just wine, cheese, museums, Fashion Week. They'll also think of technology, and I hope we're making that happen. Thanks.